there are a lot of different instances, especially as a person of color. I'll go straight there, where there are times in my career where I've had to either recuse myself because I was not going to be able to make a for-profit decision, or I was pretty stern about my opinions on why we shouldn't do business because I didn't think it was, I thought it brought reputational risk to the bank. When I grew up in Third Ward in South Side of Houston, we used to have the saying, do you want to sell your soul for a jelly roll, right? And what that means is, are you going to sell out your values for the sake of making profit? And a lot of times there are folks who are, I would say, not as rooted in that concept.
Thank you. Thank you for being a guest on the Uncompromised podcast. And congratulations on your most recent promotion in the past year as the head of U.S. commercial real estate for TD Bank. Did I get that correct?
That's correct. Thank you.
Very good. Very good. Well, I have followed your career. But first of all, just being a personal friend to my husband as well as myself and our family has been more than a blessing. So thank you for that, first and foremost. So
thank you. Likewise. Very much so.
Absolutely. Well, I'm going to head right into some questions that I know the listeners, the current listening base that I have, here are the questions they truly want answers to, Hugh. Sure. I want to look first at values and leadership. How have your personal values shaped your approach to leadership, particularly in navigating the complexities of the banking and the real estate industries?
Wow. A lot there. So, my leadership style is one that's very highly collaborative. And I have a lot of really dynamic, brilliant people who work with me and not for me. They work with me. That's where I think my leadership style starts. I really want folks to stretch themselves. I try to create an environment where they're allowed to stretch themselves, but I do have certain levels of expectation. I expect them to be not only confident, but also intellectually curious about the work that they do, and especially in our commercial real estate space. And so it's been an interesting journey for me. I went from an individual producer who was a commercial real estate lender in Washington, D.C. For many, many years, to all of a sudden managing my peers. And now, where I am today and have evolved over time, I became a leader of leaders, a manager of managers. And so your style, and I have to coach my people who manage managers as well. It's different. It's very, very different. But in our business today, we have to stay intellectually curious because there's constant change. There are always things that are unanticipated. And having that flexibility, having that almost like executive athleticism to be able to adjust in real time and to be able to be reactive, but also always thinking ahead and being proactive. You have to be able to do both, right? I think as a leader. So I've been blessed with great team members, great colleagues who have been very proficient at what they do. Have been very good at what they do. When I've had the opposite, though, you also have to have the courage to course correct and have those tough conversations. But it's been really a great journey for me because, again, that evolution over time, I think that a lot of us have when we get into certain leadership roles, and as those leadership roles progress, your style has to adapt. The number of people that you manage causes that as well.
Absolutely. As I'm listening to your answer, which is a sign of a very strong leader, I mean, you hit on several leadership styles because I believe that that's what a true wholesome leader is. I mean, you talked about how your people work with you. And to me, that's servant leadership. Even when I think about your demeanor, I know you're a servant leader to your organization. But secondly, a transformative leader, very much a transformative leader.
And I think your leadership has to be molded to what you're doing. I think back when I was paying attention at the University of Texas many, many years ago in one of my classes about how different platforms, different businesses, it likened it to sports. And sometimes sports is not a good analogy for everybody. But if you think about it, they likened it to baseball, basketball, and football. In
Yes.
baseball, it's all about your individual stats, right? In football, you have people that are highly specialized. You have people who only play on offense, only play on defense. And then you even have special teams, right? Where people are kicking the ball. And then you have to think about people in a smaller, more creative class organization. It's like a basketball team because you have to play offense and defense at the same time, right? You have to be able to turn and pivot immediately. And so understanding what kind of organization you're leading is also, I think, vital in understanding what your management style needs to be.
Absolutely, because I don't know where I read that, probably when I was paying attention in business school years ago, but just like you said, but there are times when your leadership style has to change with the climate that you're dealing with. There's times when you are more of a change agent, which is more transformative. Like you said, it just depends what team you're dealing with, whether it's baseball, individual stats, or a whole team specialty approach that all has to work together to win a game, such as football. I think you're absolutely right. Absolutely right. Absolutely right. When you talk about, let's move into ethical decision making. I think that is a hot topic, especially in today's climate. Even when I look at our generation, when I look at Chloe and Lauren, there are, when we look at the next generation, I believe they need to understand what we did. We weren't perfect, but how do you constantly keep your center focus in making sure you make ethical decisions, right? And can you share an example with us of a time when you faced a challenging decision that you had to make, an ethical decision in your career, and how did you approach resolving it?
Wow, that sounds like an interview question. That's one of those questions that we have designed for interview panels.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So let me give you maybe my foundation. One of my cornerstones to leadership and management comes straight out of the I don't know if it's a novel, but the book called The Art of War. And
love that book.
Depending upon the version that you read, because there are lots of different ones. I am a student of the Shambhala version. And on page 9, it states that in ancient times, those who govern well never have to take up arms. And it goes on to say, those who take up arms well never have to set up lines of defense. Those who set up lines of defense well never have to fight. Those who fight well never lose. Those who lose will never perish. The point that is, though, I focus on the first piece. If you govern yourself well, you'll never have to worry about any of that other stuff. I always try to make sure that I am, and this maybe goes back to my collaborative management and leadership style.
Right.
I want to make sure that I have looked at it from every 360-degree angle I can, right? I want to make sure that I've gotten as much input when I make a decision, a tough decision. Some of my toughest decisions tend to be either around when, we've got a deep relationship with a client, but the ask is a stretch too far. Or I have somebody who's been in role and has been part of the fabric of the company for decades, but they're just not doing what they need to do, and I need to course adjust, right? Those are the tough decisions you have to make, and you have to make them well-informed. You have to have a lot of different input, a lot of different opinions in the room. And then at the end of the day, you have to make that decision. And that's how I approach these things. Is making sure that I have all the input and all the data I need to make a broad input decision.
Absolutely. And if I could just add to that, a lot of times what has come with maturity and seasonality is backing out your own opinions, backing out your own focus or whatever your foundation has been so that you can see the clear picture from everyone's viewpoint to make that tough decision. That has been.
I think it's also important to let your people know that our managers themselves and leaders themselves.
Yes.
Hey, I have an idea. I have a thought.
Yes.
I'm in the middle of doing this with 2 or 3 of my leaders right now about people on their team.
Yes.
And sometimes it's hey, I'd like to advance this person. I know you may not want to lose them, but I want you to think about it, and I want you to tell me why we shouldn't do this. And I say we, not I.
Yeah.
Why should we do this, right? And I want it to be a mutual decision. I want you to have ownership in that decision. So that's kind of how I approach it.
And, as we're talking about ethical decisions and you getting a broad perspective from your team getting all the opinions in one room and then having to make that decision. Trust plays a factor in that. And so, in building trust, as we know, it's crucial in leadership. It's crucial in making sure we're empowering our people, making sure they're developing into the next level and plan that they have, on their career path. How do you build and maintain trust with your team, clients, your stakeholders in your role at TD Bank?
So it starts with honesty and not giving mixed messages, not speaking in code. And the only time I will ever resort to speaking code is when I have to, right? Because circumstances may dictate that, but that is very rare. I try to have open door policy. I try to have I do have an open door policy. I have a policy for myself of being honest in my candor and making sure that others have the opportunity to speak their mind and try to create that environment of trust where they, it's interesting. Sometimes you'll take over a team or you'll have a group brought into your world. You have to set the tone day one of not only expectations, but the fact that you are willing to make an investment in those people, in their business, in their vertical, but they have to provide you with the return to help you. I'm going to help you be successful. Help me help you be successful. What do I need to do to make you successful? Because at the end of the day, if you're successful, I am too, right?
Absolutely.
And so, but I want everyone to be bought in. I want people to have a say. That goes back to the collaborative input from folks, right? Getting that collaborative input and then making a decision. Even if the decision was against their opinion, at least they were at the table, at least they had a say, at least they had input. And that's very valuable. And I think people will trust your decision process if they feel like their voice was at least heard. And that's so key. It's also being honest about things that sometimes are out of their control and saying, it's okay, I know this is outside of your control. And it's on me to try to change it for you because you can't change it, right?
Absolutely.
You focus on what you control. Tell me what you can't influence and see if I can help you with that. So those are the ways you build trust is acknowledging, I think the fact that, in all of us, I think innately we want to do well. And how I can promote that for you, how I can put wind in your sails is putting that on day one as an objective is so important.
You remind me, I had Herman Bowles on the, I'm going to tell you, he was so wonderful to trust me in season 1 or 2, but early on, right? And he, accepted the invite and came on. But your answer reminds me of something that we talked about that actually I play the short from it, just sort of the short content from it quite often. He talked about making sure that as leaders, that we get some kind of, that part of our motivation is that we want to see those that used to be maybe underneath us or that we helped develop. We want them to see them go higher than where we are. And he talked about the pet to threat whole analogy of how he has experienced pet to threat in his career. I think I shared with him as well. I've experienced a little bit of that, but your answer reminds me of that. There is a trust factor when you have a good leader that empowers you. They want more for you than they even had for themselves, and they don't even mind if you surpass them.
Yeah, I actually joke with some of my people. I always have joked with them, but it's not 100% joke. There's some seriousness there to say, hey, I may need you to do really well because I may need you to hire me when you exceed me. That's the ultimate compliment of any leader is when one of their colleagues on their team exceeds them. Because I feel like that's that investment in them that paid off, And Herman, listen, he's one of the best. If you got that from him, if I was close to anything Herman said, I feel like I might have said something smart.
I think we all feel that way.
He's incredible. He's incredible.
He has touched all of our lives, has he not?
He has.
Well, cultural influence. Let's talk about the culture at TD Bank. How does TD Bank's corporate culture influence your leadership style? Or we can turn that around. How has your leadership style influenced the culture at TD Bank? And how do you ensure alignment between your personal values and the organization's values?
I think there's great alignment in the culture and the culture I try to create, which is why I'm happy there. I've been with TD Bank since 2014. I've experienced a lot of different bank platforms. I won't go into detail which ones and which ones were good, which ones were okay, which ones I was happy to get away from. But culture means a lot. Everybody can't survive in certain cultures. Some people thrive in some that other folks just find to be too exhausting. Mm-hmm. Listen, no place is perfect. And I always tell people when I recruit them to come and work on one of our teams at TD Bank, we're not perfect. No company is perfect. No platform is perfect. What differentiates us is our culture and our people, and the dedication to our we call it the 3 C's: our colleagues, our communities, and our clients, our customers. Mm-hmm. And if we can enrich those 3, we will do extremely well as a bank and as a firm. And I think that focus on our people, making sure that we have the willingness and the desire to invest in them and invest in their future and invest in their growth is tremendous. I had that. I've experienced that at TD. I've had the opportunity to do a lot of things, not only within my business, but also off the side of my desk that were impactful for the company. And I was able to pull some people along with me in some of that work. And it's had a great impact on I think the communities that we serve, our colleagues and our customers. So, it's our people. That's our secret sauce. I think a lot of companies will tell you that, but when you really see it in action, when you really feel it, and our clients will tell us, you guys are you just operate different. At the end of the day, everybody is a bank. Everybody's money is great. And there's not a big difference between what somebody's going to charge you to borrow money, right?
Right.
It's the people, it's the relationships that you build and how you approach the business if you're transactional versus relationship oriented. And absolutely. I think that's really been our another distinguishing piece because it is about the people.
It is about the people. And I think, I'm thinking about the banking industry and me being a client, a consumer. I go to the bank I go to because I like the people. I like the people who run the branch.
I wish we were where you are. You got the TD green on. I love what you got on.
I wore this. Yes. I thought of TD. I said, let me go with the theme here. Thank you for noticing.
I love it.
Absolutely.
The only thing is, if it was Friday, it would be the trifecta because we call it Green Friday. So.
You call it Green Friday. Well,
maybe everybody's in green at TD Bank on Friday.
Well, we'll maybe post this podcast on a Friday then. So let me ask you, in the commercial real estate sector, which is something that we deal with, we're in the same sector, balancing the interest of stakeholders, it can be complex. Mm-hmm. How do you approach this balance while staying true to your principles?
Well, at the end of the day, it's all about this is a for-profit business that we're in, right?
Yes.
And there are a lot of different instances, especially as a person of color. I'll go straight there, where there are times in my career where I've had to either recuse myself because I was not going to be able to make a for-profit decision, or I was pretty stern about my opinions on why we shouldn't do business because I didn't think it was. I thought it brought reputational risk to the bank. There's that ethics thing that comes back up again, right? Mm-hmm. When I grew up in Third Ward in South Side of Houston, we used to have this saying, do you want to sell your soul for a jelly roll, right? And what that means is, are you going to sell out your values for the sake of making profit? And a lot of times there are folks who are I would say not as rooted in that concept. We have stakeholders. I have shareholders I have responsibility to. I have a board. We have regulators. I have team members. At the end of the day, we're here to make money. Now, how we decide to make money for the bank and for our shareholders is up to us. As long as it makes sense, we don't take undue risk and find an ethical way of doing it. Mm-hmm. then we act accordingly. I'll give you a specific example. There are a lot of banks, I won't say where we are yet because we're not completely home on one side of the fence or the other, but there are a lot of banks that struggle with, for example, single family for rent. Single family for rent, some circles will say, hey, if it's developed specifically for that ground up as a community, single family for rent, that's one thing. Mm-hmm. But if you're doing site acquisitions all over the place, are you creating undue competition and driving up the cost of housing in certain communities where it becomes unaffordable? Mm-hmm. There's a lot in the legislative air about that. But some people will say, but I'm providing housing. I'm buying a house and I'm providing housing for those who can't afford to buy right now, but they want this type of housing for rent. Mm-hmm. And so how do you balance and how do you figure out pull those threads and layer a set of ethics, right, on what you want to do? There are a lot of banks that will do certain things. There are a lot of banks that won't do certain things. And, affordable housing, the affordability of housing right now is a real challenge in our country. Mm-hmm. And I think it's, given where I sit at least, it's a big opportunity for us to improve our communities and our customers' livelihoods by investing that money back into housing affordability. And so we do a lot of that. We do it through investment in low-income housing tax credits. We finance a significant amount of affordable housing construction for rent. We're trying to figure out ways to do it for sale. This is not the easiest market right now for a for sale product, but it's incumbent upon us as we overlay our ethics and where they intersect with the ability to produce for stakeholders, the returns our investors look for, the profitability the bank needs, and also doing it within the parameters of what regulators expect from us, and we should expect from ourselves. That's managing the business, right? That is what we're charged to do, and some of us do it really, really well. I have great admiration for a lot of my peers at other banks, but there are some who, I scratch my head from time to time. But that's very rare, very, very rare. For the most part, I think most banks are doing a pretty good job of finding that area for themselves in real estate.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. The topic of communities has come up in a lot of my interviews with executives at your level. And I think that they're finding a meaning, whatever industry they're in. The whole point is, how do we change one community at a time? And a lot of times there, just as you have stated, there has been a time where you have set, this is my value system of what I'm doing, which leads to another whole way of approaching diversity and inclusion, not just with people, but in how we do our business and what the people need is. Currently, we are, even within our company, are facing the challenge or the opportunity to help with affordable housing. It is a need in every community. When I think of what Microsoft did down in Atlanta, when I think of what AT&T is trying to do as well, there are just several private sector companies that are really focusing on community. I had two twins on who are changing communities down here in South Dallas, doing incredible things. But I think that gives us our why and our purpose. Hence why I had the passion of even starting this podcast, because of the answer you just gave. I think that is what people need to hear. And especially our peers need to hear it and be confirmed in it, but also that next generation.
And I think, I'm wading into the waters now. I really believe that look, in my world, I have a very diverse set of clients. They range from private real estate developers who are building grocery anchor shopping centers, apartments, industrial warehouse, own and operate all sorts of commercial properties, all the way to real estate, publicly traded real estate investment trusts, and very large pension funds that are focused on, or funds, I should say, that are focused on commercial real estate. Mm-hmm. And so, touch a lot of different property types and product types. Mm-hmm. But if you have that diversity in your portfolio, you also need to have the diversity of thought in the team that you field to work with that broad range of clients. And having that diversity of thought, I think, in real estate has been one of the bigger challenges, because a lot of times what we see is that we're going to put our diverse workforce over on one side of the business, more in the community development side of the business. I'll just be blunt.
Okay.
Whereas there's such a loss of insight, there's such a loss of opportunity to have a different perspective on grocery anchored retail, and the impact they could have on a community that's not necessarily a community development loan, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or having impact insights on, a different kind of workforce or essential housing, which is not affordable, but it's essential workforce housing, right?
Mm-hmm.
Not big A affordable, and the impact and the nature of that. If you don't have that diversity of thought from
Yes.
both ethnicity, a religious, a gender perspective, you lose so much, and everything will become very overly uniform, right? As
Mm-hmm.
far as approaches are concerned.
Mm-hmm.
And there's so many dynamic areas of need that I think that diversity of thought can help us be better as a bank, better as a lender.
Mm-hmm.
And so, there's a real effort, I think, that all of us on the financing side, as well as on the development and the property side,
mm-hmm.
Should consider as we build out our firms for the future.
Could not agree with you more. I know I'm going to respect your time because it's almost noon there, but I asked, I don't know if you, Ron Parker, I asked him, what is the definition of diversity? And he said creativity,
Mm-hmm.
innovation.
Mm-hmm.
And without that, there is no industry that will be able to serve their constituents, their client base at the level they need to be served.
No.
It's absolutely impossible. And that's what makes it a critical business decision. Go ahead.
I'll give you a great example from my experience when I was in Washington, D.C. many, many years ago. There hadn't been a new retail property built in Southeast Washington, D.C.
Mm-hmm.
in probably 25 years at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And a major grocer decided they were going to build a grocery anchor. They were going to commit themselves to a grocery anchor shopping center in Southeast D.C., which is, a majority minority community.
Mm-hmm.
When that thing opened,
mm-hmm.
it had the highest sales per square foot of any store in that chain of grocery stores.
Amazing.
And folks were a little bit surprised. I said, I'm not surprised, because people that live in that community, they have to eat. They need essential items, and they've just been going an extra 10 miles or 5 miles or however far they had to go get those essential needs.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm not surprised. So I think it's incumbent, if you don't have that diversity of thought. Somebody had that diversity of thought at the table to say,
mm-hmm.
this makes sense, let's do this.
Mm-hmm.
And it got done. And it was done
mm-hmm.
very successfully. So, IBM was always known for the button down and the blue suit and the button down shirt and the striped rep tie. Mm-hmm. I think they got a lot better when they started getting some folks with flip flops and khakis and golf shirts.
And we're laughing, but that is truth. That is complete truth. I am telling you. Well, I am going to ask you one last question and
sure.
end this. But based on my podcast, who else would you suggest as a guest?
Oh, wow. I think it would be really dynamic for you to speak to someone like, if you want to get into community.
Yes.
I would invite Jesse Van Tol to your podcast. And he's the CEO. He's the CEO of the National Community Reinvestment Coalition.
Okay.
And
all right.
He's in Washington, D.C., but his membership for NCRC is probably 750 plus now of nonprofits that serve various sectors of need in all the communities across the U.S. It's you talk about diversity, it's very, very diverse. And he has a real passion to make sure that we are all held accountable for investing in the communities that we serve in the financial industries. And I've gotten to know Jesse. I admire him. I think he does a great job of leading his coalition of nonprofit members, and his voice is pretty powerful coming out of Washington, D.C. So if I had someone to suggest, that's a different voice,
yes,
than maybe you would think of in this space. But he does have a lot of influence on real estate. He has a lot of influence on communities, and he brings a different. He and his team bring different DNA to the conversation.
I would absolutely be honored to have him on the podcast. I think that, again, the whole passion and the whole creativity, and the reason why I'm even taking time to do this when there's so much more on the plate, is because I think that one voice at a time helps to make change. It helps to build things up. And so thank you again. I know you need to go, but thank you for being
Thank you for the opportunity to meet with you. It's great seeing you.